I bought a glass eye from the dark web. Now I can see things I never wanted to see. This story was posted by Matt Deeping. I lost my left eye when I was only 7 years old. It was a stupid way to lose an eye, but luckily most people tend not to ask how I lost it. I think the majority worry it might be insensitive. It's not a story I like to tell. Not because it's upsetting or brings back bad memories. I just feel embarrassed by it. Growing up, my brother and I were obsessed with Robin Hood, the outlaw of Sherwood Forest, who would take from the rich and give to the poor. I'm not going to pretend this heroic savior of the poor was our hero because of his good deeds. We simply liked him because of his legendary skill with a bow and arrow. Our father, a keen gardener, had lots of bamboo sticks all piled up beside the shed which he would tie plants to in order to stop them from drooping when they grew. It was my brother's idea to take one and attach a length of string to both ends to create a bow. I thought he was an absolute genius. When we had finished making the bow, we made an arrow, simply by using a handsaw to carve a small groove into one end of an arrow-sized piece of bamboo, which would act as a nest for the string to sit. "I'm first," my brother said.
"No,"
I cried. It was my idea, so I got to shoot first. And that was that. At one end of the garden, there was a little wall which surrounded one of my father's flower patches. Upon the wall, we placed an empty plastic bottle to be used as our target. My brother, of course, then took the first turn, missing wildly and falling far short of the bottle on the wall. Next it was my go, and I also missed. It took about an hour before we had both knocked the bottle off the wall once. "Right, now you stand in the middle and I'll shoot over your head at the target." Another genius idea by my brother. I didn't argue. I thought it was a cool thing to do, and if I did it, then my brother would have to let me have a go shooting over him. I don't believe he meant to do it. It was just a careless accident, but the arrow never made it past my body. It struck me hard and deep in my left eye. Straight away, blood poured down my cheek, and I screamed in agony. I spent a couple of days in hospital before the doctors decided they would have to remove what was left of my eye. Until I was 12, I wore an eye patch, but when I moved into secondary school, I decided to get my first glass eye to try and put an end to the pirate jokes. It might sound weird, but I loved my glass eye, and by the time I was 16 and leaving school, I had collected dozens, all different colors and designs. My missing eye stopped being something I tried to hide and, in a strange way, became my kind of signature. Kids would say, "Have you seen the boy with a spiral in his eye?" Or, "Have you seen the lad with an eye like a cat?" I enjoyed this. It allowed me to embrace my injury and make it part of my identity. I carried on collecting glass eyes for many years, always on the lookout for new designs or something different to what I already had. When I was 25, I discovered the dark web. A friend from my Dungeons and Dragons club told me about how he had used it to buy some sort of hallucinogenic drug. I didn't plan on using the dark web for anything like that. I was just intrigued by the idea of it. Once I was on, I started looking for stores. It was amazing and disgusting. People selling guns, drugs, services, and even other people. It made me feel a little bit ill knowing I was now a part of this strange illicit world. I went on to one store page which called itself Mr. Bubble's Objects of Trouble, which was the first store I had come across which had a search bar. So I thought, fuck it, let's see if they have any. I typed in the words glass eye. I didn't expect anything to come up, and I was rather surprised when a match popped up on my screen. The item was called the Sight of Sin, which was simply a black eye with a small red number 7 on it. It pulled at my fancy, so I decided to buy it. I didn't truly expect it to show up, but 1 week later a package arrived, and there it was. As customary with all my new eyes, I washed the eye in a solution to make sure it was clean. When washed, I put it in a case with the rest of my eyes and went back to watching television. The next morning, when I woke up, I thought I'd test out the new eye to see if it was a good fit, to check how comfortable it was. It went in with ease and felt absolutely perfect, so I decided to leave it in for the rest of the day. Nothing strange happened at first. It was just my usual daily routine of having breakfast and doing some work on my laptop, but then the doorbell rang. As I opened the door, I immediately knew something wasn't right. I had double vision all of a sudden. There was only one man standing on my front doorstep trying to sell me solar panels, but I could see him twice. One image of him was completely ordinary, just the bloke dressed in a suit holding a brochure and telling me about how he can save me money on my electricity bill. But the other image, well, it was him, but dressed up in a gimp suit, cracking a whip against the floor lustfully. I don't think I said a word to him. I just stared transfixed by what I was seeing. Eventually, I closed the door and stood there for a moment trying to understand what had just happened. I passed it off at the time as just my mind playing tricks on me and that I must be overtired. I decided to have a nap. I was woken by a telephone call from my father asking if I was still coming to his house for dinner. I looked at the time and realized I was running late, so I grabbed my coat and flew out the door. On my way to my father's house, which is just a 10-minute walk down the road from mine, I walked past just one person, a lady, walking her dog, but again, I was seeing double. In one image, she was completely ordinary. Apart from being overweight, she was wearing a pink coat, and beside her a dog trotted along minding its own business. But in another part of my vision, I could see her again, completely naked, eating tinned dog food with a fork. Jellied meat dripped down onto breasts, which she licked ravenously. I was almost sick. I thought about just going home and going back to bed, still trying to convince myself I was simply tired from working, but my father missed not having me at home, and I didn't want to let him down. Though now I wish I did. Now, what happened next won't make much sense unless I explain something. When I was 2 years old, my mother died. I say died. She was killed whilst walking home from work one night on this very estate. Nobody has ever been caught in relation to her murder, but now I know exactly who took my mother from me. My father opened the door with a large grin on his face. "Come in, son," he said cheerily, but I did not move. Besides the image of my father standing in the doorway was another vision of him holding a knife, and laying beneath him on the floor was my mother, soaked in blood, eyes vacant and still. I took a step back from my father and did not stop running until I had reached the front door of my house. Straight away, I went on to the dark web and searched for Mr. Bubble's store, but it had gone, vanished, like it had never been there. I didn't leave the house for a few days. I didn't answer the door. I didn't even pick up the phone. What I did was sit by the window looking out onto the street, watching the people walking past. I think I know what I am seeing now. It makes little sense, but it's the only thing I can think of which almost explains what I am seeing. Firstly, when I remove the glass eye, I no longer see two images of everyone. I only see one just like I always have, but when the eye is in, I see two visions of every person I look at in the flesh. Secondly, I think I know what I am seeing. I am seeing their sins. I know that sounds utterly mad, but it's the only thing all this seems to point to. The name of the glass eye, the red number 7, and the grotesque and disturbing images I see. I believe it's their sins I am seeing with my new eye. I see the true hideous nature of people, the part of themselves they hide from everyone else. I know I could just take the eye out and forget about it, but I just can't bring myself to do this. I can't trust anybody without it. I can't see the real them. But seeing people's darkest secrets also leaves me alone, for once you see the hidden nature of someone, you never want to be close to them again. Many questions remain. Why does this eye allow me to see these things? Who made it? How did it end up on the dark web? I need to know the answer to these questions. So, please, if anyone out there has any information on the eye, or if anyone has ever come across Mr. Bubble's Objects of Trouble store, then please get in touch. Please. Why I stopped using dark web. My story begins a few years ago. I decided to use my computer skills to run a small darknet forum, mainly just to share information without censorship. At first, I was extremely paranoid about my site getting hacked and having my anonymity being compromised. So, I went online and began to research everything that I would need to ensure my own safety. After countless days of scouring blogs, forums, and other material, I decided I was ready. Now, I didn't have any money, so I couldn't just buy a VPS and host the site offshore or whatever. So, I decided to use my old laptop. After all, I wasn't planning on running a major website. So, after setting the server up and what I thought was literally every single thing I could do to harden it against attack, I put the site online. Everything went great for a couple of months. Donations rolled in as the user base grew larger and larger. After around 5 months, the user base had gotten so big I had to upgrade and migrate everything to a new PC, which I built just to host the forum. From there, everything seemed perfect. The site was running smoothly, and there were no issues with the migration until one day. When I came home and noticed the PC had frozen, I didn't think much of it, maybe just a software bug. So, I rebooted, and that's when it was clear to me something was wrong. The PC lit up and beeped a few times, then shut off. So, I thought to myself, okay, so it's a hardware issue. After a few hours trying to diagnose the issue, I figured it out. It turned out the RAM had been corrupted. I took it back to the store since it was still under warranty. The customer rep just told me it might have just been a faulty stick. When I got home, I replaced the stick of RAM and had the site back up and running within a few hours. Everything seemed to be perfect again. I apologized to the users for the downtime, and everyone seemed to be happy enough. Fast forward a few more months, and the forums had been up and running for around a year and a half. This is when things started to get really weird. I finished work on a Friday. It was a gorgeous day in the middle of summer. I came home, had something to eat, and sat down in front of my PC. That's when I noticed I had a message. Upon opening the message, I realized that somewhere I'd messed up. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not like Assange or anything, so I don't really know why anybody would actually target me. But the world is a crazy place, so whatever. The message had my details from my name, address, bank details, passwords, private emails, private messages, everything from nearly every single device I owned. I freaked out and immediately took the PC offline, turned my internet off. But little did I know that this guy had done his research. After a couple of hours pacing my room, I received a text message. I know everything about you. The message was sent via some type of SMS service, so there was no way to trace it. And then my phone rang. Don't talk, just listen. I know everything there is to know about you. All I want is 2 Bitcoin or things get worse. I'll send you a text with the wallet details. The phone call ended just as quickly as it started. I opened my laptop up and checked my Bitcoin wallet. There was enough left over from the donations just to pay this guy off and hope that would be the end of it. So, I entered the guy's details and sent the payment. My phone rang again. Thank you for complying. Unfortunately, someone I know really likes you. He hung up. Panicking, I tried calling the number back. An automated message began to play. The number you have dialed has not been recognized. A few hours passed, and I began to think to myself, maybe the last call was just him having fun, and decided after a long day, I'd just go to bed. Sometime around 2 a.m., I was woken up by the sound of banging at my front door. I jumped out of bed, turned on all the lights, grabbing a knife from the kitchen. I walked slowly towards the window and looked out. I could see someone standing by a car. When they spotted me, they got in and drove off. I rushed to the door in hopes I might be able to get a license plate, but by the time I'd opened it, they'd already turned the corner. As I turned, I noticed an envelope on the floor. I picked it up, went back inside, and locked the door, closed the curtains, and sat in the kitchen. I placed the envelope on the counter and stared at it for around half an hour, trying to muster up the courage to open it. Did these guys really come to my home? I thought to myself. After the half hour was up, I decided enough was enough. I opened the envelope and pictures fell out onto the counter. They were of me sleeping. These guys had not only been outside my house, they'd been inside while I was sleeping. The images had been edited, and strange love hearts had been added next to me. So now, I was sufficiently freaked out. I didn't go back to sleep, and when the sun broke the darkness, I decided to head to the police station and tell them everything. I hadn't broken any laws, so I hoped they would just help me. At least after hours of explaining everything to them, they told me there was nothing they could do. At this point, I had never felt so alone in the world. I was scared of what this guy was planning for me. I didn't have the foggiest idea what I was supposed to do or expect. So, I decided to wipe everything. My laptop, PC, and phone. I picked up everything I needed, stuffed it all into a bag, and decided to leave. I had a couple of friends that I knew I could rely on. So, I called up my old buddy Marcus, and we met, had a few beers, and I explained everything to him. He offered me a place to stay, and I hoped that would be the end of it. How wrong I was. A few days later, it happened again. There was a knock at the door first thing in the morning. Marcus and I both went out to find another envelope on the floor. Same thing, pictures of me sleeping, but these were in Marcus's house. I started freaking out again, and Marcus just said, "Okay, well, we need to do something. Maybe set a trap or something." So, we went over numerous ideas, everything you could think of from cameras to baiting him. And we settled on the idea of staying up during the night and locking him in the room. We filled the bed up with pillows, set up cameras, and even barred the windows in the room we hid in the room next door. After a few hours had passed, we heard the lock rattling on the front door, and we knew it was game time. We'd left the door just slightly ajar so we could see outside as he went past. And the moment he went into the room, we both sprung to action. Quickly as we could, we closed the door and locked it from outside using a chair and a metal bar. There was only one way he was getting out, and he'd have to destroy the door. We could see the silhouette of him as he paced the room quietly. It was creepy as hell. We called the police as we kept an eye on him. At last, I thought I can finish this and move on with my life. Just as the police arrived, we noticed the guy take a gun out and place it to his head. He held a sign up which read, "I love you," and he pulled the trigger. The police barged in, guns drawn, told us both to get on the floor. We complied and shouted, "He's in there," pointing at the door. The police removed the makeshift lock and entered the room, called for an ambulance, and put me and Marcus in the back of a police car. I'd been sitting in the interview room for a good couple of hours, I guess, whilst they carried out the investigation, when a detective came in and sat down in front of me, opening a folder and placing pictures on the table. "Do you know her?" "Her," I said, looking at the pictures.
No, y replía confusa.
He looked at me and said, "This is the person who's been stalking you." And he then began to tell me they had visited her home and found a shrine with photos of me all over the place, from restaurants to the gym, even shopping. He went on to tell me that she'd been the one that sent the messages, made the phone calls, etc. And they'd also found a diary which had some kind of future plans for me and her. She wanted me to be her husband, and we'd been chatting for around a year and a half from the moment I started the forum. After I explained everything, the detective said I was lucky to be alive. She had actually planned to drug me and kidnap me. She had even made some makeshift lock bed so I wouldn't be able to escape. To this day, I feel lucky, and I haven't been on the dark web since. I made a mistake on dark web. This story was posted by L.Just.URA. One night, I was home alone, watching videos on YouTube when I saw a video in my recommendations called Dark Web Mystery Box. I didn't know anything about the dark web at that time, so I was curious. The video seemed like a fake and like everything was scripted, but I started thinking about it and about the stuff the guy from the video said. Is the dark web really a place where you can find a hitman or buy drugs or even watch a murder live? It was getting late, so I decided to go to bed, but I couldn't sleep. I couldn't stop thinking about that dark side of the internet. I decided to go back to my laptop and try to find a way to access the dark web. Really quickly, I wound up a tutorial on how to download the Tor browser and search for the hidden wiki. I downloaded and installed Tor and started surfing on hidden wiki. It really was true. You could find guns, drugs, government secrets, and other stuff really easily. When I saw all that, I knew that the stories about live murders were true, and I really didn't want to see that. Now, it was really late, so I turned off my laptop and went to bed. Weeks passed and I visited the dark web from time to time, just surfing and not doing anything really. I started to spend more and more time there, and I lost my fear that something bad could happen, the biggest mistake of my life. One day I was on Hidden Wiki and I got bored with the same old stuff, drugs and guns. I wondered if there was something like chat roulette or Omegle on there, so I started to search for some chat. I was still careful, so I put duct tape on my camera so that no one could see me. After about 20 minutes of searching, I wound up a chat where you could only write, but that was good enough. First, the site asked you to type in your nickname, so I typed in Funseeker and entered the chat. There were 20 or 30 people online, and they were just talking about some random stuff on the public chat room, and I decided not to type anything. A couple of minutes passed, and someone called Only God and Me sent me a private message saying, "Are you looking for some real fun?" And I replayed, "What kind of fun are we talking about?" He sent me a link without answering my question. The link was just some random numbers. Deep down I knew that clicking on that link was a bad idea, but my curiosity took over me, and I thought if there was something I didn't want to see, I would just shut down my browser and everything was going to be fine, so I clicked it. First thing I saw was a clock that had 15 seconds left on it, some kind of countdown. On the right side of the screen was a live chat, and everyone had a nickname, and the nicknames were just some random numbers. One message caught my attention, and someone said, "I can't wait to see what he will do next." I looked at the clock, and it only had a few seconds left. Now I was getting scared. The countdown finished, and all I could see was a naked girl covered in cuts and bruises and burns. She was sitting in the corner of the room crying and holding her head with her hands. The room was small and didn't have any windows, and it was really dirty. I could see urine and feces stains all over the room. This girl was here for a really long time. I couldn't move. Fear paralyzed me. Then a guy in a butcher's suit walked in. He had a mask on, so I couldn't see his face. In his hands, he carried 2 buckets with something that looked like car oil in them. He poured one bucket on the girl and the other one on the floor and then left the room. The people in the chat started talking. "He will set her on fire." Yes, I couldn't believe my eyes. What kind of people are these guys? How can someone do something like this to another human being? I quickly typed, "What the fuck is going on here? This is insane." A second passed after I typed that, and the man came back into the room, and again he had 2 buckets with him, but this time, the buckets were filled with broken glass, and he poured it all over the room. He grabbed the girl by her hair and started throwing her all around the room. She was screaming in pain and begging him to stop, but he didn't. He kept on throwing her. She was covered in blood, mixed with bits of glass sticking from her skin. I felt sick, so I typed, "This has to stop. I'm reporting this to the cops." Someone replayed, "White, you're next." I shut down my browser and called the police. They came and asked me some question about what I saw and asked me, can they take my laptop to try to find that live stream I just watched? I said, yes, and they left. I went to the kitchen and opened a bottle of whiskey just to try to calm myself down, but it didn't help. Eventually, night came. I couldn't sleep. That girl was in my head. Is she gonna be all right? I looked at my clock on my nightstand. It was 2:15 a.m. I was asking myself, why did I click on that link? When I heard something outside, it sounded like footsteps. I looked outside and I saw a black van and one big guy standing in front of my house and looking at my bedroom window. I realized that someone in that chat said, "You're next." I was so scared I couldn't breathe. I immediately locked myself in my bathroom and called the police. They came in a matter of minutes. The operator stayed with me on the phone until the patrol car came. They searched the area but didn't find anything, and they told me to call if I see anything suspicious. I started to get paranoid and everywhere when I started to notice that black van even during daytime. One time I tried to see the number of the license plates, but they were covered with newspaper, and every time I called the police they couldn't find anything. Eventually I moved and I didn't see that van for 3 months. I got back to my normal life. Yesterday I saw it again. They found me somehow. I don't know what to do anymore. I think my life is in danger.